Hi guys, my name's Hannah. Welcome back to my book channel. If you're new here, hello. As you can see behind me, we have a Taylor Swift album. If you did not know, I'm a massive Taylor Swift fan. And this video, I've seen quite a lot of people do it, but they all seem to have the exact same book recommendations. So my idea is we're going to talk about the award-winning Grammy award-winning Folklore by Taylor Swift. Anyway, I'm going to give you book recommendations based on the album Folklore by Taylor Swift because it won a Grammy, which made me very happy. This is my favourite album from Taylor Swift, with Reputation for me, because the Reputation also was my favourite album. Anyway, I have a bunch of books behind me and they kind of intertwine the themes of Folklore. I also have the vinyl version of Folklore by Taylor Swift. I've not ordered Evermore yet, but I need to because, oh my god, it's stunning. It is like absolutely beautiful. Anyway, I love that the record player is my mum's. Yeah, I just seem to have loads of records for it. The book recommendations, I thought it would be more fun to do album by album themes rather than doing all of them, because obviously Taylor's re-recording Fearless, which is out soon, which is really exciting. I thought we'd get into it. Stack here. So as you can see, I have a bunch of books here that I feel would have inspired Taylor Swift in some way or another through a songwriting process. And if you aren't a fan of Taylor Swift, then I don't really know why you clicked on this video. We're going to go through the track list, and then I'm just going to tell you what songs I think go with said song. So the first book in my recommendation is for the song The One. Now this one is called One Day in December and it's by Josie Silver, and I think this fits the theme with the song in The One. My favourite lyric from that song is, I think this One Day in December, is essentially about Laurie and James, and they basically go through years of their lives where they are always in each other's lives, and they could have been together had Laurie not introduced him to her best friend, and then him and her best friend end up dating, and Laurie essentially ends up on the sidelines. That's not a spoiler, that's literally in the blurb. I think the lyric that goes with this song, particularly from The One by Taylor Swift, is that like all the fun that they had, and literally like the lyric that I like most of The One is and if my wishes came true it would have been you. Like, so simple but so, you know, everyone literally probably thinks that at one point in their lives. That is my first book recommendation for The One. What's the word? A love triangle. I guess you could read this and it's not December, so that is my first recommendation of The One. The second song is Cardigan, and oh my god, that song is so good. I just wow. Cardigan. I still don't own a cardigan because they always sell out every time I go try and buy one. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to buy a medium or a small, and then I was confused, so I just haven't bought anything. I think I'll probably buy the Fearless vinyl when it eventually comes out. Anyway, the second song is Cardigan, and essentially I feel this song really encapsulates, is that the right phrase? The song Cardigan really encapsulates this book, which is called The Versions of Us by Laura Bennett. And if you have never read this but you've read Normal People, I would suggest reading this because I hated Normal People. I didn't have a fun time. There's a whole vlog of me reading Normal People. I'll link it up here somewhere, but essentially I did not like that book. But if you want a more mature version of that, people going through years of their lives and they always end up somehow intertwined and fall back into each other's lives. I absolutely loved this novel, and if you've never heard of Laura Barnett, I cannot stress to you enough how much you need to read this, because essentially this book encapsulates the song Cardigan and Invisible String all like tied together. Did you see what I did there? Like, you know, tied together in Invisible String. This book is about Eva and Jim, and 19, are students at Cambridge when their paths first cross in 1958. Jim is walking along a lane when a woman approaching him on a bicycle swerves to avoid a dog. What happens next will determine the rest of their lives. Just is so beautiful. I love this story. I love how it was told, and people have compared this to David Nicholls' One Day and Kate Atkinson's Life After Life, but like, oh my god, it's so good how people's lives can become intertwined and then they fall apart and meet all together again, and it's like nothing has changed, like years pass later. And I think this one really does encapsulate the song Cardigan, because, you know, the lyric, once the thrill expired, I knew you'd come back to me. You'd be standing in my front porch light. Is that the lyric? Essentially, one of them. Anyway, essentially, I recommend this book, and I don't see enough people talk about this, and it's not on one of the recommended pages, which I have looked up. I looked up recommendations for Taylor Swift books. Well, this literally is the song Invisible String in book format, so highly recommend. The Last Great American Dynasty. I really tried to find the actual book about Rebecca Harkness, is that her name? The woman that actually used to live on Rhode Island, but I couldn't find that anywhere, so I'm just going to suggest a classic because I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift reads reads classics to get inspiration, so I'm just going to suggest a classic which is one of my all-time favourite classics, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This one is a really short classic, so if you're not into classics and you feel really intimidated by them, or you have watched the movie and never read the book, it's like 200 pages, and I feel like the book is just so much better. And the lyric that comes to mind is Roaring Twenties, tossing pennies in the pool. Highly recommend this one based off that lyric, and I just wanted to suggest a classic basically. Yeah, so that's, you know, that song. Next, track number 4, Exile featuring Bon Iver. I couldn't really find one that was that you know, that depressing. However, this one is one that I see absolutely no one talk about. I see everyone talk about the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, and I see absolutely no one talking about this book, and this is Taylor Jenkins Reid's After I Do. And girl, if you need to cry, I would just read this book and you will cry, because this essentially is a book about a married couple that decide to separate but stay married for a year, literally just right after they get married. So essentially you follow them on their different paths while spending time apart, and they're still married to each other. And you know, if you're reading this and then listening to Exile and you just needed a good cry, it will make you cry. So I would highly recommend, and I think not that I like to be a different person, but I just think reading the unpopular ones, because I put myself in a category where I'm like, I'm not going to read popular books, and then I read them and I'm like disappointed. Normal People. I did not like it. I didn't like the TV show either. I could not watch past episode 3 because I felt like I was watching some... I think you all know what I was about to say. Anyway, I would highly recommend After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, the next song is My Tears Ricochet, and I couldn't really think of a book that encapsulates betrayal that much, but I think of one that encapsulated betrayal. But I'm just going to suggest another classic, because I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift said that she read this and it was like an inspiration for some of the themes in Folklore, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I read this earlier this year and it's hands down my favourite classic I've ever read. I read it in like 48 hours and that never happens to me. But if you've never read it and you've seen the movie versions, I'd highly recommend, because it's such a good classic. It's not like, the language isn't too dense and this storyline is hauntingly like creepy, and it's so good. Essentially, Rebecca is dead. That's not a spoiler. Rebecca is dead, and you follow Mr. De Winter and his new wife on their journey into being married, but everywhere she goes she's haunted by the ghost of Rebecca. Not literally, just, you know, the maid. That evil maid. What on earth is her name? I hated her. I hated her with every fibre in my body. So anyway, Rebecca is a high recommendation, and I've read somewhere that Taylor Swift has read this book, so I'm pretty sure there's an inspiration for her album. Anyway, now the next ones are more, you know, more of the positive side of this album, and I have to say there are only like 4 songs on this album that it cut me off as I was saying. There are only like 4 songs on the album Folklore that have like a positive vibe, if you will, which are Invisible String, The Lakes, and August. And well, August I guess not really, it's kind of about an affair or a romance that wasn't really there. Anyway, so the last few are kind of fluffier reads and not as depressing. But anyway, I just thought I'd suggest some of these because these are some of my favourite books, and also one has a Taylor Swift lyric as a title, so I mean, not from Folklore, it's just not lit. The lyric is Never Be the Same from, I feel like I'm doing a Taylor Swift quiz in my own brain right now, trying to remember. Oh, Starlight, that is Starlight? Is that the song? Oh god, yeah, it is. Anyway, so I suggest this book, which is by Haley Doyle. It's called Never Saw You Coming. Hilarious. I loved it. It was great. I read this last year, and it was when I just got back into reading romances, because I read a lot of thriller books and I'd had enough of reading thrillers, and I thought, if I need to stop having nightmares and have good sleep, I need to stop reading thrillers and being paranoid every time I leave my house. So this one is so fun. So essentially, Zara believes in, I love the tagline for this, I feel like this would be a Taylor Swift lyric, like an inspiration. The tagline is, some people go looking for love, others crash right into it. Essentially it follows the life of Zara, who believes in love so much that she flies from Dubai to Liverpool to be with a man she barely knows. It's a risk, but she's certain that uprooting her life for Nick is the new start she needs. Jim is stuck. Since his dad died, he put his arms aside and stayed home in Liverpool to care for his mum. Trapped in a dead-end job, he's going nowhere. That is until he gets a phone call that might just change his life. Zara and Jim aren't supposed to meet, but then fate steps in and their worlds collide and the real journey begins. I loved this story. It doesn't really give much away, but once you start reading it, it made me laugh so much out loud, and I literally, you know, when you read a book and you simply can't put it down, like you take it everywhere with you, like whilst you're brushing your teeth, you know, you literally take it everywhere with you, making a cup of tea, you can't put it down, even when you're like eating dinner and everyone's like, stop reading, I'm talking to you, and you're like, no, I'm busy reading my book. Highly recommend this one if you're into a little romance read, although at the time maybe laugh because they were going to Dubai in this, and I was like, what's the obsession with Dubai? And then I read that the author actually used to be an expert in Dubai, so I don't know. I mean, I personally don't see the appeal of Dubai, don't think I'll ever go there, but this book, highly recommend, and especially since the title is a Taylor Swift lyric. Not from Folklore, but anyway. The next one is called Our Stop by Laura Jane Williams. This one is so good, I loved it so much. This follows the story of Nadia and Daniel, who both get the 7:30 tube into London at the exact same time every day, and there's a section called Misconnections in the paper that is on the tube, and Daniel writes Nadia a message, and they keep having near misses and being so close to each other without knowing, and you're building up to that meet cute, and I feel like it's just such a positive story, and it made me really happy, and I thought I would just suggest some lighter reads, because I mean most of the other reads have been a bit heavy. Obviously Folklore's a heavy album, it's not for the faint-hearted to listen, like it's a sad album, but hell it won a Grammy, that's exciting. The next book on my suggestion or I have as a suggestion, is the Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This follows two flatmates that essentially never meet, or, well, I don't know why these two last books have themes of people near misses and not meeting, or meeting and then essentially either falling in love or not. I don't know. Anyway, this one, loved it as well. This one is about Leon and Tiffy, and their friends think they're crazy, but the perfect solution. Leon occupies a one-bed flat at Tiffy's work in the day. She has a run of the place, but with obsessive ex-boyfriends, wrongly imprisoned brothers, of course the fact that they still haven't met yet, it seems Flatshare is more complicated than expected. So essentially they are always never in the flat at the same time, and then essentially it comes to a point where they end up meeting. I won't spoil it, but I highly recommend if you are into another fluffy read. And the last book on my suggestion for the award-winning album Folklore by Taylor Swift is A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. Just simply because I wanted to recommend a Nicholas Sparks book, because I feel like they're a lot less heavy than most of the other suggestions, like the Rebecca, the classics, the versions of us. Like most of the books before this had really heavy themes and heavy topics that aren't even don't really give you a trigger warning, but I think it's because they're advertised to older audiences. So yeah, I would recommend anything by Nicholas Sparks if you are into, if you're listening to like Fearless, especially the new version of Fearless when it comes out. I recommend anything by Nicholas Sparks, because the wonderment of falling in love for the first time and the enjoyment like through all of those songs and Nicholas Sparks books is what I first fell in love with reading, and I was listening to Taylor Swift, and here I am like 13 years later still listening to Taylor Swift. So okay, well this was my book recommendations based on Folklore by Taylor Swift. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I shall see you guys in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.